With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Eric Pennington, who's going to be delivering today's keynote. Eric Pennington is the managing partner at Spirit of EQ and is a certified practitioner in varied emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and neuroscience tools. Spirit of EQ is an emotional intelligence data and people development company based in Columbus, Ohio. The company helps individuals and organizations be smarter with emotions in order to create stronger results and satisfaction. He has designed and delivered learning experiences for organizations across the spectrum of public and private domains. The experiences include coaching, group workshops, and ongoing learning cohorts. Eric has 15 years of practical entrepreneurship and leadership experience inside of small and large organizations. He has advised multiple entrepreneurs and senior leaders through coaching and group facilitation. He is the author of the eye-opening book, The Wellbeing Guide, Making the Most of Life and Work, based upon personal experiences, and as a follow-up to his book, Waking Up in Corporate America. Would you please join me in welcoming to the stage, Eric Pennington.
Thanks so much, Dave. I appreciate it. Well, good morning. I'd like to start off this morning and let you know that I began my career when I was 10. So all that 15 years of experience, I'm still 25. So you'll have to help me in that regard as I keep going. So this morning, what I really want to see happen, outside of me giving you some insights about emotional intelligence and the work we do and why it's important, is hopefully it'll stimulate you for questions. So we can have a time of that toward the end. I actually find that to be the most powerful, because that way you can kind of make it your own, okay? So if I went through the room today and I did a little survey and I asked you, maybe for some, a rhetorical question, do you believe that emotions drive people? Would you raise your hand? Okay. Yeah. But what's interesting about that is that the majority of people that you will come in contact with, maybe even yourselves, would find managing those emotions is another matter altogether. So kind of to set the context for today, I want you to think about someone that you know as it relates to they could be a student, they could be an employee. And like them, and like me, every single day of life, we are encountering various problems and opportunities, some at a lightning pace. What happens as human beings when we encounter those various problems and opportunities? Our brains and emotion. So imagine that person that I got you thinking about is coming into work or coming to school. They're on a freeway system and they're cut off in traffic. They almost get in an accident. After they realize they're not going to be in an accident, they get a call from their significant other saying, "Did you remember to let the dogs out?" "No, I didn't." They realize this is going to make them late. This is a very important class. It's a very important project at work. Now imagine this person has not used any of the tools available to them to manage all those emotions that might have come with just 3 events. That's 3. And it's only about an hour into their day. When you look around at our society now, this is probably not very surprising to you. But the big question that we get so often from our clients and prospective clients is, well, what do we do? Well, we got to start paying attention to that area of our brain, the emotional center. And I know some of you this morning came in and you are more of a logic-based bent, right? And that's okay. I'm not here to tell you you need to stop being logical. But here's what's interesting. Before the pandemic, logic took us really, really far because we could measure things. We got the project in on time. We had the earnings, we had the gifts, we had the events, and all of these things could be measured. Here's what we do, here's what's next, and it makes total sense because that's our prefrontal, that's our executive function. It makes total sense. But what's interesting is the pandemic pulled the rug out from underneath every single person in this room, myself included. The script was flipped. Many of us, and you may have heard it from friends, family, coworkers, said, I just can't, can we just get back to normal? And that made total sense. But what happened was this fundamental change that created, you've heard this term, the new normal. It also implied that we were going to be in a position that we could no longer just use logic to solve these various problems and opportunities. In our work, we believe that one of the foundational tools and ways to do that is managing what we think and what we feel together so that we can make an optimal decision. That's kind of the premise. Does it happen overnight? No. Can I just spread some of my magic pixie dust across the room and then tomorrow morning you're managing your emotions like, like awesome? No. And by the way, if I could do that, David would be paying me a lot more money than he paid me to come here today, let me tell you. So let's look at a definition of what we mean by EQ. We kind of interchange that. It's our short for emotional intelligence. And it really is this idea of I take what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling, I manage that so that I make an optimal decision. So for example, as I used earlier, you're cut off in traffic or that person's cut off in traffic. Okay, the emotion comes. I am afraid. What am I thinking? I got to make a decision. Well, we all know what happens in that short period of time, right? It can either be really, really good or it can be really, really bad. When you develop a practice around this, it's not going to guarantee that the situation is going to go your way, but it will increase the chances that you will make an optimal decision. It's kind of this idea about I'm going to respond versus I'm going to react. And most people react because, when that emotion comes, your brain is flooding you with all types of chemicals, hormones, and peptides. And that's not a great time to do it. I'm going to show you today a little exercise that you can take home with you that can sort of mitigate that a bit. So there's the definition. So when we talk about change, and I use this idea of change and fear because that seems to be the prevalent thing on the minds in diverse groups of people. Why is there so much change? Why is it so, it's happening, it's one thing after another, after another, after another. I can't keep up. There is change that we choose. I don't know if you guys have ever done a rehab project in your home or maybe even in a volunteer situation. But it implies that we're going to move from what we once did or what it once looked like into something new. And once again, wouldn't it be great if you could snap your fingers and voila, new paint, new carpet, new furniture, it's done. But you all know that process is messy. It's really messy. And I'm not here today to tell you whether or not I think the pace of change is okay or not okay, or if it's healthy or unhealthy, because a lot of that is an individual view. But I can tell you that the navigating of the change improves dramatically with this idea of practicing emotional intelligence. It becomes more efficient. Again, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to make it better. It's not going to make it go your way necessarily, but it positions you to be in a place that I, quite frankly, want every day, and that is being healthy, right? So the idea of fear. What is fear? It's an emotion. That's what it is. And by way of a little bit of science for you, and I know many in this room probably know this, fear as an emotion is like every other emotion. It is a chemical in your brain. That's what it is. It just so happens to be a communicator because it makes total sense. Because remember, your brain is operating to protect you. So when it senses that there's something happening out there, it's going to create that. It's going to release that. So many people find themselves in unhealthy places because they interpret fear as the enemy. And I get it. You're in that near accident on the freeway. You're afraid. That's natural. But once again, how do we navigate that versus react in that? The reality is, many people don't do such a great job with that. And once again, I would tell you it's because they don't either have access or they haven't been shown the tools that can help them. Again, not to change the circumstances, not to make everything go their way, but to position them to navigate better. So if fear, and it's an emotion and it's chemicals in your brain, it's communicating, what is it communicating to you? Well, there's some variances that can happen from human to human, but certainly one of them is a fear of I feel like I'm gonna lose something. There's a threat here. But let me ask you a question, kind of rhetorical maybe. What would happen if you didn't just jump to a conclusion about what the fear was trying to tell you? What if you and I were willing to just pause for a little bit? Maybe like my water bottle. You know what? Instead of me just throwing this thing and going the other way, you know what? I'm going to look at it. I wonder what's going on here. Now you'd say, Eric, hey, if you just almost got in an accident, I'm not going to be looking at a water bottle, my friend. And I get that. But you see, as you build your emotional intelligence, as it rises, you'll be able to do this very quickly. Trust me. You'll be able to say, oh my gosh, I'm feeling fear here. All right, I know I'm going to have to do something. I got to move over to the side of the road because I know from history I'm much better when I can be calm and sitting. Okay, doom. What? 7 seconds? And for you, hey, it might take you 5. Today, it might be like, I don't know, I got to go, I don't know, that's okay. What's not okay is if we stay in this cycle and we continue this, because change and fear kind of connect with one another. They're almost like next door neighbors, right? And the tendency for us as human beings is to withdraw, to hide. I'm here today to tell you, and by extension, those that you lead, you don't have to hide. It's just fear. It's fear. Matter of fact, the more I name it, the more calm I get, because it's just fear. All right. What if I told you I have some EQ tools I can give you today to help, right? I can be very useful for you this morning. So I'm going to give you some tools that we use in our work and our clients that helps them move to this place of where when they encounter a certain problem or opportunity, they have something to go to, right? In our world, we oftentimes call it a competency. But I think you'll find these to be pretty effective, and I'll show you a little bit of the exercise around how they can be used as well, right? So this is a big one. And I get it. Is everybody in the room today busy? Do you have stuff going on, stuff you got to take care of, right? I'd be shocked if you told me, no, Eric, I'm just killing time. So what does this mean? In our world, it is about awareness. We have a life pursuit that we focus on called Know Yourself. And what it is designed to do is to help you get into a place of literacy with your emotions and the patterns that you typically repeat day in and day out. Because the reality is that one of the reasons why people have a tough time with emotions is that they really don't know what they mean. They have not spent any time with them. They won't stay for fear. They won't give themselves the opportunity to know that maybe fear is just trying to get a message to you. And maybe if we started thinking about it in terms of fear is kind of saying, hey, Eric, I'd like to get your attention about something. And if we're willing to, this awareness piece allows us to go, hey, you know what? I do understand what fear is. I know what typically it means. I know what my history is. I have an understanding of it. You guys in the education world, you know this. Literacy, to understand something, to know something, to be able to put it into action. Employers, when they see that they have this certificate or this diploma or this degree, they want to be able to look at that person and go, we're confident that when they start on Monday, they're going to be able to hit the ground running, right? Well, how about for us as human beings? Shouldn't we be hitting the ground running and managing these things that are driving us every single day? I think so. So it's kind of that idea of awareness. The next tool for you is this idea of reframing. You've probably heard it before. It's been talked about, it's been written about in multiple areas. But where we go with it is using optimism. 3 years ago, I was given a diagnosis of a very rare liver disease, and it was not a message I wanted to hear. It was right in the midst of the pandemic, and that's why, quite frankly, guys, if I can share something with great transparency and vulnerability and all of that good stuff, when I'd hear people say, oh, so-and-so is probably I think they've got COVID, I would immediately go, I'd trade you. But here's the deal with it, guys. Once the information is delivered to me and once I'm grappling with all that it meant, I had a choice. You know what I decided to do? Well, okay, this is a fact. They say it's no doubt it's this diagnosis. Well, what could I do? Well, I could make sure that I exercise at least 6-7 times a week, right? I can do that 6-7 days. I could look at my diet again and see, could I improve that? Maybe I should eliminate, maybe I should add. You know what? I could really be more intentional about managing my stress. And you know what? They didn't tell me that. You see where I'm going, guys. I took something that was really, quote, bad, and I started saying, well, what if there's another angle about it? Optimism is a choice, right? And it needs to be a deliberate choice. It is this belief that there is hope and there's possibility. And guys, I get it. There's some things that are irreversible. There are some things that are not going to go your way. But you know what? I kind of wake up every day and look at it from the lens of, well, you know what? If I'm going to get a knock on the door from our friends at the IRS or the Grim Reaper or whatever you want to use as I don't want to get that call, at least when I face them, I will be strong. I don't want to face it cowering and wondering, what could I have done? You see? So there's the optimism. And it is not the absence of reality, by the way, just in case anybody's thinking I'm just heading down the toxic positivity route, right? A problem is a problem. But once we acknowledge that there is a problem, we can begin to see, well, what could we do to solve the problem? What are some of the options that maybe we haven't considered? Who have we not called yet? Right? So again, I'm acknowledging there's a problem. I'm acknowledging I don't like it. But, well, what could I do? This comes from an area of our work called Choose Yourself. Last one. Listen to others and yourself. Empathy could be your superpower today. But hear me out. I'm gonna do a little turn for you. Any of you in the room familiar with Brené Brown? Have you ever seen, heard, read that kind of thing? Yeah. I was never a big Brené Brown fan. I just have to confess. And it wasn't that she said anything that offended me. And it wasn't that she wrote something that I disagreed with. It wasn't that kind of thing. But what it was is that she just never clicked for me. You know, I love Miles Davis. You may like Travis Tritt. I'm sorry, okay? I get it, right? But here's what's interesting. I'm watching this interview she did with Oprah. And she was talking about how she was changing her mind about this idea of empathy and what it was. Well, immediately my respect for her goes up because I'm going, this is a person that's basically saying, I think I got it wrong. And if you guys know Brené Brown, if you've read any of her work, she's pretty brilliant, even if she's not your thing. She goes on to say that, and I'm probably going to paraphrase it poorly, but it's this idea that if you want to be empathetic for another human being, you need to listen to their story and you need to believe them. And you know what? She said, and I thought this was brilliant as well. The hard part is believing them. Because my story might mess with your view of the world. You may think that certain ethnic groups and certain genders and are such and such, but then you hear me tell you my story and it just makes you say goodbye to empathy. See, I'm of the mind is that we can listen to their story and we can believe them. And please don't misunderstand me. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. And the last time that I checked, at least for me, when I want to be heard, I don't qualify it with, I need to be agreed with. I want to be heard. And if you think that the people that you interact with, the people that you lead, the people that you teach, the people that you work with, whatever they may be, if you think, oh, Eric, they have somebody, I'm gonna tell you, if you only knew how lonely most people are. And that may include some of you in the room today. But here's the great news. You can start today by learning the art of listening and believing. You can. And it will free you up as well. Because isn't it kind of cool that if you want me to listen to your story and believe you, and you're not looking for answers from me, wow, pressure's off. I don't have to solve that particular problem for this person. And we know this deep in our core. This is what we want. I just want to be heard. I want to be seen. And before I let you off the hook, I'm going to talk about self-empathy. Yeah, that means you, by the way. Every person sitting in here right now, you and self-empathy. So let me ask you, when was the last time you listened to your own story and believed it? Or are you one of those folks that maybe thinks, I don't like this story and my boss wouldn't appreciate it, so I'm going to change it so that I can fit in and I can move to the next whatever? Self-empathy is equally as important as the empathy for others. And without it, that change in fear thing can be really, really big. For others and for you. Okay, just before you were thinking that this was not going to have any interactive nature, I got to do this. It's tougher in a large room, but we got to go a little interactive. So at your tables, and it doesn't matter how many people you have, I'm only going to give you a few minutes to kind of process a little bit about what I've said in a very short period of time. Again, I'm hoping that this conversation that we're having together is going to create questions about what you've heard, but synthesizing this together can be really powerful. So what I'd like you to do at your tables, and you can just pick one or a few, whatever you choose, whatever you're comfortable with, psychologically safe environments that we create. Don't feel like you got to go where you don't want to go. But first, what area challenges you most? Change or fear? How could EQ, based on what you know from me and maybe what you knew coming in, how could it help you in navigating fear and change? And maybe the most important one is, what are you going to do with this time that we've had together? Is it the conversations around empathy? Is it an idea about growing emotional intelligence? You have to do something. Because without the application, Well, you know what this is? This is just an exchange of information and on to the next exchange of information. So I'll give you a few minutes. If I have a timer, I'll go with it and talk amongst yourselves. Use these bullets, and we'll come back together and finish up. It makes my heart sing when groups continue to talk, and I mean that, really, because it shows engagement, and I really love it. Okay, so two things. This process that we go through, it's not just an act of randomness. We have an approach to how we interact with groups, with our clients, especially in group form, is that there's this thing called engage, activate, and reflect. Because we want to take you through a process where there is a likelihood that you are moving toward behavior change. And don't misunderstand me, it's not that you have bad behavior that needs to become good behavior. It means improvement, moving to improvement, continual improvement, right? So I promised you a little exercise that would help you in the day-to-day. I hope that I will see some of you again, that this won't be the last time that we're together in some way or fashion. But if this is the last time, if I leave you with this, I think it'd be something that you can carry on for days, weeks, months, years ahead. And it's this idea of the pause. We kind of touched on it earlier. I don't know if you had this, a parent who did the you better count to 10 before you, anybody in that? You've ever had that? You better think about that before you say anything, right? Well, my mom probably didn't realize that there is actually science behind that, okay? So I mentioned to you earlier about how there's all these chemicals, hormones, and peptides. They get released when an emotion appears. What we found is that in about 6 seconds, those chemicals, hormones, and peptides subside. So it's probably not lost on you that, wow, if I can get through my 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 8 seconds, everybody's going to be different. I'll position myself for the prefrontal part of my brain, the executive function, the decision making to kick in, so I can make the optimal decision. So when the emotion comes, find your pause. Find something. Now, for me, it's prayer. That's what I go to. I need that space to be able to say, Lord, I need some help. I don't know if, I don't want to overreact, and this is a sticky subject, right? For you, it may be different. You may meditate. You may practice mindfulness. You might just utter, I have a partner who does the 7 dwarfs backwards. That's her go-to. I'm one of those people, the 7 dwarfs, I'd be an hour in, right? So for her, that's what she does, right? So find yours. And if it's 6 seconds, you can give it time, and then you can respond. I didn't like what you said to me, Roger. I didn't like what you said, Cindy. It was a little offensive. Could we talk about this maybe after the meeting? That's a lot better than reacting in the moment when all the chemicals, hormones, and peptides are going, and you roll your eyes and... Because what we don't realize is that we are creating perpetual problems. What was one problem, was the comment, turns into 3 others. And you're just adding to that. So there's your exercise. Emotion comes, give yourself a pause, then make a decision. It's powerful. All right. Thank you. Before applause, thank you very much. I love that. I'm hoping there's questions. David and his group have microphones. He'll come around to you, raise your hand. What questions might you have for me about what we've talked about? And I want to help you in that regard too. Personalize as you feel comfortable.
Eric.
Okay.
So I got a question for you. I work with a lot of engineers who are usually conscientious, perfectionism, fear of failure and making a mistake. And I see them having a hard time working with the creative person who's the free-form thinking and has a lot of really neat thoughts, but they'll stay within themselves, they'll crank the numbers, they really just want to get it all figured out on their own versus being part of a team and being willingness to share their ideas as they haven't they formulated the perfect answer yet. How to bridge those two styles, how to get those people engaged that they can leverage each other's capabilities versus staying solo or really having confrontation because they can't take it in the moment.
Yeah. Again, another great question. And I smiled like I did because I'm a creative and I've worked with engineers and it can be challenging. I think one of the key ways, and it's not really touched upon in what we talked about today, but it's this idea of understanding personality, right? I'm a big fan of the Enneagram, but there are others, DISC, Myers-Briggs, on and on and on. But what I have found is that when I get an understanding that you're an engineer, okay, it appears that you approach things the way many engineers do, the way that they think, maybe the inability to be creative and to see things from a more free-form perspective. If I know this about you, it sets me up to come alongside of you in a way that doesn't tear down what you do. Typically, if I have done this, you will give that same opportunity to me. Now, granted, guys, I understand from a leadership perspective, if you're that senior leader, you may have to format this thing where it's like, okay, everybody, we're going to do the Myers-Briggs, we're going to gain more understanding of personality, we're going to practice the emotional intelligence, and then as we have the conflicts and the day in and day out stuff, we're better prepared to handle it. Because when it comes down to it, and there is a consequence, there is a competency inside of our model that we use called applied consequential thinking, okay? And it's this idea of counting the cost and the benefits of the decisions I'm about to make. Again, if a person practices that, it positions them to go, okay, wait a minute, I already know that he's an engineer. I already know that his personality type is geared toward this. I shouldn't say this because that's going to be kind of dismissive in his mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a powerful, open-ended question. What's the best way for me to interact with you when it comes to these kind of problems? But I can't stress enough, everyone, this has to be built. It has to be practiced because the tendency is, and I've been there, the engineer walks in the room, what do? I roll my eyes. Okay, here we go. More spreadsheets. Right? Just like with me, they'll say, oh, there's the creative. Hey, everybody, let's put on some music and meditate. You know what I mean. Hopefully that helps some. Sure. Who else?
Yeah, other questions? Where can I bring the mic to next? 'Cause I do have one, Eric.
All right.
When you were talking about, I think this was in, so when you're talking about empathy, listening to others' story and believing it, right? That and believing it part is a really important part. And I'll just reflect a notion that many of my colleagues in the room might share. Students, when they're in front of us sharing their stories, I'll just say me. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know, right? And I'm just going to own that, right? Because why do we do that? Because we've got these little compartments in our brain, right, where we've heard that story before, and it proved to not be the case, or at least we thought, right? So I wonder if is unlearning something in your portfolio vernacular, right? Okay, you're laughing. So talk to us about how we combat that, right? Because again, I'm owning it for all of us, okay? So you can thank me later. I'm owning the fact that when students in particular find their way in front of us and share their stories, we may not always be believing them as much as we should. And how can we do better there?
Yeah. Well, take heart. All of us have brains today, and I'm going to imagine most of them are functioning well, right? Your brain is designed for a lot of things. One of its three most important things is to protect you, to be efficient, and for ease, right? You probably take the same route to your schools, to your office, whatever, every single day. You just do. And that makes sense. Your brain's helping you. Well, guess what? When you've heard the story before, your brain's saying, we've heard this before. We've heard this before. Not because it's a moralist, because that's up to you, right? So there is going to be some friction. The great Andrew Huberman calls it limbic friction when we try or attempt to make a change. So there's that unlearning thing. And I can't stress enough, David, and it's really, really even deepening my belief here today, people want to be heard. I'll tell you an embarrassing quick story about me and my wife, because one of the things I have been working on, I want to be a better listener. And where do we typically experiment? In our homes, right? So I'm in this mode of, okay, I'm gonna listen to what she says. And she began to talk about some of this, I guess they would be called naturopath doctors. Some people see these folks as being the fringe of the medical world. And you may or may not see that or believe that, but that's not the point. So she starts telling me about how she had listened to this podcast, and this particular naturopath doctor said that you should do this and you should do that. It took about a half a second for me to go, oh boy, quack time. No, I don't believe, no, my gosh. And you know what happened? I had already started preparing myself to how I was going to tell her that it's not like this, it's like this. Guess what I missed? You think I missed any sentences, any content, any emotions? Of course I did. So when we got to the place where she wanted to know my opinion, it was all based on what I believe, what I know. But the reality was, she just wanted to be heard. And guys, time is spent. It cannot be saved. I'm never going to get that time back. So that creates the urgency for me to go, okay, Eric, good, you know a lot of things, but shut up. Let the person tell the story, in this case, my wife. Let her tell the story and believe her. If she believes the natural path is a path that has possibility, then believe her. If she asks you, do you have any reservations about this, Eric? Well, guess what, Eric? Then you'll have an opportunity to say what you think. And that requires practice, David. It does.
No, I thank you for that counsel, and it resonates, and I think it's maybe most powerful to what would we want in this similar situation, right? What would we hope for? What would we expect? And I think that goes a long way, right? Where can I bring the microphone to next? Anyone else? No one? All right. Right here, okay.
Hi, my name is Amelia. I'm with Harris Products Group. So one of the obstacles that I run into, and this is just, it can be professionally or personally, is listening comes with taking a pause, right? And it is my absolute pet peeve when people interrupt. Do you have a key of how you can get someone else to slow down and listen to you?
So take a breath. That's a good one. That's a good start.
But
take
how
a breath.
do you ask someone to take a breath, right?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me finish without saying that 5 times.
Yeah. I think, here's the part that I did not, but I think you guys probably got this, right? That when we listen to others, it's like planting a garden and fertilizing it. It creates trust, right? And we always want to be building trust. I mean, that should be a constant, intentional thing. Build trust, build connection, build trust, build connection. So that when you and I are talking, and tell me your name again, I'm sorry. Amelia. So you've been building trust with me, I've been building trust with you, we're building connection day in and day out, intentional, not just accidental, intentional. And then in that conversation, maybe I'm just going all over the place. But I look at you and you're looking at me going, Eric, what's wrong? Or Amelia, what's wrong? I want to know. Because we've built this trust thing. I don't want it to be broken. I don't want to do something that's going to make you feel uneasy. If you don't do that, you run the risk of it being a conflict that is rooted around, it's kind of irritation, right? And trying to overcome irritation is tough because we're running on limited data, right? This is why judgment, by the way, is so dangerous, okay? Because it's rooted in limited information. If I can look at you and decide, oh, that's how they are, I can keep moving, right? But what do I actually know about them? When did I ask them a question? When did I engage with them? This part is part of that. When you have these circles of close, right, you've got to build a connection, build the trust, build the connection, build the trust. That positions you so that when you're in that situation. Now, if it's someone who you see very rarely, I sometimes believe it's important to say, Amelia, I got to call a timeout here. You're moving very fast. For me and my personality, I need it to slow down. Are you good with that? Could we do that just for the sake of this? That might work. But again, if it's something where it's somebody you're working with consistently on the same team or what have you, it should be intentionality around, I'm building connection, I'm building trust. Building connection, building trust. Hopefully that helps. And right here, Dave or someone with a mic, sorry.
I did have one question.
Okay, yes, and then we'll come to you.
Okay. I've been practicing my pause, so managing emotions, but sometimes my face doesn't pause. Okay, so you could see on my face that something. So do you have any tips on like the bodily expressions, facial? So my face. So that's my question.
I got to tell you, I love authenticity, and on the Enneagram, I'm a 4, and that's a vital thing is authenticity. So I appreciate you, I really do. What I have found, here's a great example. I am not a natural smiley, happy face. I'm more introverted. I'm more in the blues. I'm more intense of the depths, right? So if I'm not careful, you'll think he's either really, really sad, really, really perturbed, or all that kind of stuff. I have made a conscious decision that when I'm in environments, I smile. When I get on a video call, I consciously say, you put on the smile, you put on the smile, you put it on, right? Because, to your point, your pause gets negated if I think, okay, right? But your ability to, I'm here, just like you're doing right now with me. And I get it. You may say, but Eric, you don't know my cousin, right? I get it, but it's practice. That's what I would say. Yeah. And
I'll say there's one last question.
Yeah.
So one last question, then we're going to invite Eric to offer a closing thought. And
sure. Yeah.
So my name's Mark Beard, also with Harris Products. So we talked about building trust, building connection. We haven't talked about when it's broken and what that conversation looks like and how you handle that communication with whomever that is that you maybe work closely with or you work not closely with. Then what does that look like? How do you handle, and you're with the emotional piece, whether it's leader, subordinate, coworkers, what in those cases, how would you suggest?
I think because when trust is broken, whether it's you're the leader, the manager, and it's the team member that you've got to have a tough conversation with, you got to pay attention to what's going on inside of you first. I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm disgusted. And you got to give yourself the time for it to message to you. And you got to be able to find that calm. I find for me, when I mentioned to you guys earlier about the use of open-ended, powerful questions, is a powerful tool to make it more efficient and easier for me to have the tough conversation. Because I don't want to get into this, well, you did this, and then I talked to you this 2 years ago, and when we did this, blah, 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 blah. And then it just becomes this cycle, right? So I think it's that understanding and knowing what you're experiencing with the emotion, naming it, by the way, is a really good idea. Name it. Okay, and guys, I'm not talking about walking down High Street naming all the emotions as you feel them. I'm saying to yourself when you're in that moment, name them. And then allow the message to come to you. You get your calm, and then, hey, we need to sit down and talk about a few things. Tell me a little bit more about this. How, what, why? And this will not rob you of your authority. It will not rob you of a decision that your company or organization says must happen. It just means you're doing it in a way that has a greater possibility of a greater outcome. So, if that helps. Okay. All right, so last things from me for you. Thank you for interacting. Thank you for just being here, being present. I know that it can be tough, and you know, my hope would be is that you would take today and find 1, 2 things that you can say, you know what? I think I'm going to start putting some effort around this. I'm going to start listening, more empathy. I'm going to find that calm. Because I am one of those people that believes that when you guys start doing that, that increases the chances that the better days are ahead of us as a society too. I want that. I believe you want that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric.